Hi guys, it's Sheridan. Welcome to my newest video. Today I want to talk to you about living a simple lifestyle so that you can be available for God to use you. But before we get started on that, you may notice the different scenery here. I am in my mom's house and this is her guest bedroom. You might notice this very cool triple bunk bed. I so far have 5 nieces and nephews and 3 of them happen to be triplets, so we pack a house. Anyways, a couple other quick mentions of this cute bedroom before we dive into the video. Do you see those blue books up there? Does anyone remember what the Hardy Boys books are? If you're from my generation or even before me, you probably know what those are. My brothers wore those out when they were younger. And also some cute signs behind me here. This sign by Peter Pan. It's not by Peter Pan. He's not real. But from the Peter Pan movie, the sign says, "The moment you doubt whether you can fly, you cease forever to be able to do it." And then the sign right behind me from Alice in Wonderland says, "It's no use going back to yesterday because I was a different person then." So every time I walk into this room, it makes me really happy. And I just had to tell you about that. All right, let's get started. Also, I don't know why I'm doing these peace signs. I think it's because I'm hanging around my 14-year-old brother and it just brings out the little kid in me. So let's talk about simple living. It's kind of an interesting topic, but I guess the best way I can explain it is with a story. When I went on my first missions trip, I went to Ireland in the middle of undergrad. I went there for 3 months one summer to intern at a church and to work with the homeless. And prior to going to Ireland, I had an apartment. I loved decorating. I loved, hanging out with friends. I went out with friends to coffee every night of the week. I had a very full schedule. I had a lot of things, a lot of activities. And there's something about going on a missions trip that really shows you there's another way to live. And when I was in Ireland, I lived in this little closet of a bedroom. I had no stuff except what was in my suitcase. And my life no longer revolved around interior decorating or just all the activities and time fillers I had before. My life was solely focused on the missions work that I was doing, and it was so freeing. I never thought I would like a life without so much excess stuff, but I found that when I wasn't focused so much on the stuff or just the needless activities that I was involved in, suddenly there was more time and energy to devote myself to kingdom work. So I want to read you this parable that's kind of been on my heart. It's the parable of the wedding feast. Jesus is speaking to the crowd. This is in Luke 14, starting in verse 16. It said, "Jesus replied with this story. A man prepared a great feast and sent out many invitations. When the banquet was ready, he sent his servant to tell the guests, 'Come, the banquet is ready.' But they all began making excuses. One said, 'I have just bought a field and must inspect it. Please excuse me.' Another said, 'I have just bought 5 pairs of oxen and I want to try them out. Please excuse me.' And another said, get this, millennials, 'I have just gotten married, so I can't come.'" Oh, that's what we want to be telling God, isn't it? "Sorry, I can't dedicate time to you. I just got married, or I just got a new job, or I'm starting a new work project," whatever it is. They were all making excuses. And that didn't make the master too happy. So the servant returned and told his master what they had said. His master was furious and said, "Go quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and invite the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame." After the servant had done this, he reported, "There is still room for more." So his master said, "Go out into the country lanes and behind the hedges and urge anyone you find to come, so that the house will be full. For none of those I first invited will get even the smallest taste of my banquet." Now, this may seem like a perplexing parable to you, but here's what I get from it. God is preparing a great wedding feast. You know, as Christians, we are the bride of Christ, and there is going to be a marriage between the bride of Christ and the groom himself, Jesus, and God is inviting all mankind to participate and to come into his kingdom. But what this wedding feast parable is saying is that so many people on this earth are so consumed with just earthly things. They have such a temporary focus on the things that they see with their physical eyes that they can't see with their eternal eyes. They can't see there's a bigger story being told and there's a bigger perspective worth having. So I just want to talk about some of the things that kind of clog our eyes and clog our focus, so that we can kind of assess where we're at and maybe make some adjustments. Listen, we're leaving 2020, we're going into 2021. If there ever was a time in your life that you could make a radical change so that you can make yourself more available for God's kingdom, this is it. I've known so many people to make so many major shifts in their lives, because when the world goes crazy, you can't just stay the same. It's either fight or flight. Like, you're either going to adjust or you're going to be in reaction mode. So maybe instead of trying to get back to the old normal, let's just pray and ask God what the new normal for our lives should be. So here's the 3 energy/time suckers that a lot of us struggle with. But first, you know my love for water. It hasn't gone away. In fact, it's only increased. Also, you may see that I'm repping my Oklahoma Sooners shirt. That's my alma mater, and I love OU. Okay, so 3 energy time suckers. The first one is just the chase of money and wealth and possessions. And I know most people in the Western world have this struggle just like me. Once upon a time, God convicted me that I had way too much stuff. And it wasn't until he opened my eyes that I saw that my life revolved around possessions in my home and just physical things. But you know the scripture that says, store up your treasures in heaven, because where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So it's okay to have things, but we don't want things to have us. We need to have an eternal perspective that shows us anything that I can touch, this is all temporary. This is not going with me into eternity. So it's nice, but it should not be our main focus. So money and possessions. The second thing that's kind of a time and energy sucker is work, hobbies, obligations, activities. Listen, we all gotta work. We all have hobbies. We all have things to do. It's great. I think God created us to work hard and also enjoy the fruit of our labors. But if our whole focus in life is work and not God's kingdom, we're missing it. If our whole focus is climbing the corporate ladder or filling our time with coffee dates or just constant hanging out with people or running kids to a million different, activities, soccer practice, whatever, if all we're doing is stuff, but we never actually carve out time in our schedule for God, we're missing it. And then the last time sucker is relationships. So listen, family is important. People are important. I believe reaching the lost is important. We need to disciple nations. It's great. But here's what I mean by relationships can be a time sucker. When I was in undergrad, I used to have so many different friendships going on, but they were all very surface level and shallow. I'd be hanging out with a different person every night of the week, but it really did little. And because I always had something going on, I never really had time to really go deep with God. I would read my Bible and I would show up to church events, but there wasn't a lot of depth to my relationship with God until I started making time with him a priority. And it wasn't until I cleared my schedule of some of the things that had been filling it that I had time. When God did ask me to go into full-time ministry, I was finally able to say, yes, I can do that, because I made room to be available to him. But there was a season where I was working 3 jobs and I had a million things going on. And honestly, if God would have asked me to do something, I don't even know if I would have heard him. I don't know how I would have responded, because sometimes we just have so much going on, we forget about God. So I just want to reiterate, I'm not saying people, things, work, activities, money are bad. I'm just saying we need to have an eternal perspective in order to not let these things become idols in our lives. Because back to the wedding feast parable, marriage is good. But if you getting married to someone keeps you from responding to God, that's not good. Having lands, running the farm is good. But if tending to your oxen, or if we want to bring it into 21st century context, like tending to your business that you just started, if that keeps you from God, it's not good. There's a verse that says, like, if your eye is causing you to sin, then put your eye out. And obviously that's symbolic. Like, we're not supposed to go around stabbing each other's eyes. Please don't do that. But the point is, don't let earthly things so consume you that you're not available to God and his kingdom. And I've done that before, but it's a grievous thing when you realize I have been living for temporary things instead of living for an eternal kingdom. So how do we know how to be intentional with our time? You know, it's all good stuff as long as it doesn't become an idol. How do we know what to do? Well, here's what I want to ask you to do. I'm going to give a little homework, and you don't have to do it, but if you want to challenge yourself, I would encourage you to do this. Set aside 20 to 30 minutes to take inventory of your life, preferably before you really get into the new year. But, you know, whenever you watch this video, set aside 20 to 30 minutes, grab a notebook, grab your pen, and then just kind of set your heart on God, you know, get in that mindset where you're really listening to him. Sometimes to tune into God's presence, I'll listen to some worship music, whatever you need to do, get in God's presence. And then I want you to do 5 things. First, ask God what your focus should be right now. For everything, there is a season. You can do anything, but you can't do everything at the same time. So when I was in grad school, I did not have time for YouTube or music or anything else. Grad school is the focus. But now that I'm not in school, I have time for other things. And I'm prayerfully asking God, what is the focus of this season? You know, God might say to you, it's time for a new career. He might speak something about your family, or that it's time to focus on your health or your ministry. Or maybe he wants to give you a new hobby or stir up an old dream that had kind of been put on the shelf for a while. So ask God what your focus should be right now. The second thing is, I want you to list all of the areas of your life that feel chaotic, cluttered, or stressful. You know, it's one thing to have a crazy season, but if every season is crazy, then that's more of a crazy lifestyle, and that suggests that you don't know how to set proper boundaries on your time and energy. So list all of the areas of your life that feel cluttered, stressful, chaotic. And then third, ask yourself and ask God, do I have the ability to make changes in any of these areas? If so, what? And bonus homework, create 1 to 2 practical steps for change. So when God convicted me that I had too many physical possessions, I had a whole storage unit full of stuff, and I just had so many clothes and so much decor and just stuff, and it was stressful and obnoxious. And so it began a long process of slowly decluttering and just picking out the few possessions that really brought me joy and getting rid of the rest. And honestly, that process took a couple years because it was like phases of slowly letting go of things that I used to hold on to. So ask yourself and ask God, do I have the ability to make changes here? If so, what? And then create 1 to 2 practical steps for change. The fourth thing, ask yourself this: what would I spend my time doing if only I had more time? Pray about it. For me, I realized that I wanted to spend more time discipling people, and I wanted to kind of give more time to creative giftings like music. So I'm doing piano lessons right now. I tried to do lessons in grad school. I didn't have the time, but now that I do, it's something that's bringing me a lot of joy and fulfillment. So pray about what you would do if only you had the more time. And finally, the fifth thing, ask God how you can simplify your life and or tune in to him better. So sometimes there's just too much noise. There's too much going on around us that it's like we want to give ourselves to God more fully. We just don't know how. And so there's no condemnation if you've had trouble hearing from God or you're just so busy or whatever. There's no condemnation. We have to continually work out our salvation. Just because I declutter my life once doesn't mean it's always decluttered. Some seasons are busier than others, so you just need to know what you have the grace for in that season. Like I said a moment ago, it's one thing to have a crazy season, but if your whole life is crazy, that suggests something else. So obviously, your life gets more complex the older you get, as you have a family and work and home and just more things to take care of. So this isn't to condemn you if you're busy. This is just to say what is really the priority in your life. And if God isn't really a part of your everyday life, if you don't have time to spend with him on a daily basis or at least several times a week, have real quality time, I would question if you put your money where your mouth is. Like, you say he's a priority, but you're really not making time for him. It's not condemnation. Like, I want you to feel what you're saying, that there might be a discrepancy there between what you say and what you actually believe and walk out. Because if I'm in love with a person, my life is going to revolve around that person, and I'm going to talk about that person all the time. We all know what it's like to be young and in love. Like, you're obsessed with that person, and even as the relationship ebbs and flows, they are still like part of the cornerstone of your life. So if God really is who you says he is to you, make changes in your life and make yourself available to him. Because when we stand before him at the end of our lives, none of this other stuff is really going to mean all that much. But what's going to be most important is that I made myself available to the creator of the universe, and that I did what I felt like he was calling me to do. Obedience is what he wants. It's so worth it to make the adjustments now to actually be able to hear him say, "Well done, thy good and faithful servant." Remember, having less stuff isn't necessarily the goal. Minimalism has its benefits, but it's simplifying your life so that you are more available to God. It's not just having less for the sake of having less. I have a couple last thoughts I'm going to tell you before we wrap up here. Learning to live a simple lifestyle is not a moment in time. It is a process. It takes time, and I have to keep at it. If we're just talking about physical possessions, I have to declutter my home regularly, because by nature I am a pack rat and I like to collect things. I like stuff, but I regularly go through all my stuff and I get rid of things that don't really serve a purpose or don't really bring me joy anymore. So if you compare that to your spiritual life or just the things that fill your plate, it is a regular process of analyzing and saying, "God, here's the plate that is my life. Is there anything that you want to remove or add on this plate? I want to live a balanced lifestyle, and I want to make myself available to you." All right, guys, I know this was a long video, but it's something that's so important. We cannot afford to live a life that we were not designed to live. God has a specific purpose for you that only you can fulfill, and I want to see you fulfill all that God has called you to do. So I'm going to pray for you, and we're going to close. I will link some scriptures as well as a good sermon on this in the description box below. God, thank you for these wonderful people that tuned in today. Would you help them to prioritize you and you alone in their lives? And I just ask you to give them grace to step into this new year with a new sense of purpose and fruitfulness and focus. God, help us to let go of all of the time suckers that don't need to be there, and to tune into you and your kingdom. We want to say you are worthy of our time and our energy. We love you, God. Amen. All right. Happy New Year, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.